An elite Russian reconnaissance unit, highly trained, highly equipped, highly valued, just walked into Ukrainian lines and surrendered. Not after weeks of siege. Not after running out of ammunition. They surrendered with full gear, operational weapons, and classified intelligence intact. This was not a story of defeat through attrition. This was a story of complete psychological collapse at the highest levels of Russia's military structure. By the time we are done, you will understand why this single event represents a fracture in Russian military morale that Moscow cannot spin away. Welcome to States News. If this is your first time here, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what I am about to show you is not just another battlefield update. This is evidence of something far more dangerous to the Kremlin than any weapon system Ukraine could deploy. I am going to show you exactly what happened when members of Russia's 14th Separate Special Purpose Brigade, one of the most elite reconnaissance formations in the entire Russian military, chose surrender over continued service. We will cover the tactical circumstances that led to this surrender, the strategic significance of losing specialized personnel with access to classified operations, and the psychological warfare implications that extend far beyond this single unit. By the end, you will understand why Ukraine releasing this footage represents a calculated information operation designed to accelerate the disintegration of Russian unit cohesion across the entire front line. Russia's special purpose brigades occupy a specific tier within Moscow's military hierarchy that most general audiences do not fully comprehend. These are not standard infantry formations grinding through trenches in eastern Ukraine. The 14th Separate Special Purpose Brigade operates under the direct authority of Russia's main intelligence directorate, the GRU. Their personnel receive extensive training in deep reconnaissance, sabotage operations, intelligence gathering behind enemy lines, and high-value target elimination. Selection standards mirror Western Special Operations Forces. Physical fitness requirements exceed standard Russian military thresholds significantly. Psychological screening attempts to identify candidates resistant to stress and capable of independent decision-making in isolated operational environments. Equipment allocations reflect their elevated status. While standard Russian infantry struggle with outdated weapons and insufficient protective gear, special purpose units receive priority access to modern optics, secure communications equipment, night vision systems, and precision weapons. The average Russian conscript might wait months for a functioning rifle scope. Special purpose operators deploy with thermal imaging and encrypted radios as standard issue. The strategic value of these units extends beyond their tactical capabilities. They represent Moscow's investment in precision warfare capability. In modern conflict, mass infantry assaults achieve limited objectives at horrific cost. Special purpose units conduct the reconnaissance that identifies high-value targets, the sabotage operations that disrupt logistics networks, and the direct action missions that eliminate enemy leadership. Losing experienced personnel from these formations cannot be easily remediated. Training replacements requires 18 to 24 months minimum. The knowledge and experience walking into Ukrainian custody with this surrender represents years of institutional investment simply evaporating. Ukraine has systematically documented Russian prisoners of war since February 2022 for multiple strategic purposes. First, adherence to Geneva Convention protections builds international credibility and distinguishes Ukrainian conduct from Russian treatment of prisoners. Second, prisoner interrogations provide tactical intelligence about enemy force dispositions, morale conditions, and operational planning. Third, documented prisoners become leverage for future prisoner exchanges that return Ukrainian personnel to service. Fourth, and this is critical, prisoner footage serves powerful information warfare purposes. Every Russian soldier who sees footage of surrendered personnel being treated humanely understands they possess an alternative to death in a trench. Every Russian family watching state television propaganda about Ukrainian atrocities confronts visual evidence contradicting official narratives. The release of footage showing Special Purpose Brigade members in custody follows established Ukrainian information warfare doctrine. But the timing and framing reveals sophisticated psychological operations targeting specific audiences. The footage does not simply show prisoners. It shows prisoners explaining their decision to surrender, discussing treatment by Ukrainian forces, and in some cases directly addressing Russian personnel still fighting. This transforms documentation into persuasion. The goal is not merely to inform, but to induce similar decisions among Russian personnel facing comparable circumstances. The tactical circumstances surrounding this surrender reveal critical details about current battlefield conditions along contested sectors of the front line. According to Ukrainian military intelligence statements released alongside the footage, members of the 14th Separate Special Purpose Brigade were operating in a reconnaissance capacity near Kursk Oblast when they made contact with Ukrainian forces. The exact date remains classified for operational security reasons, but the footage release in late March 2026 suggests the event occurred within the preceding 2 to 3 weeks. The unit was not encircled. They were not cut off from retreat routes. They possessed functioning communications equipment and could have withdrawn to Russian lines. Instead, they initiated contact with Ukrainian forces and negotiated terms of surrender. The tactical significance of this decision cannot be overstated. Reconnaissance units operate with significant autonomy. Unlike standard infantry under constant supervision from officers and political commissars, special purpose operators make independent tactical decisions based on evolving battlefield conditions. This autonomy is necessary for their mission profile, but creates vulnerability when morale collapses. There is no commissar watching to prevent desertion. There is no officer maintaining discipline through threat of punishment. When operators decide the mission no longer justifies the risk, they possess both the means and the operational independence to act on that assessment. The intelligence value of captured special purpose personnel exceeds standard prisoners of war by orders of magnitude. These operators possess detailed knowledge of Russian tactical doctrine, communications procedures, and ongoing operational planning. They know locations of command posts, supply routes, and reinforcement schedules. They understand Russian electronic warfare capabilities and vulnerabilities. They can identify which units maintain combat effectiveness and which exist as hollow formations on paper only. A single captured special purpose operator provides more actionable intelligence than dozens of standard infantry prisoners because their operational knowledge spans far beyond their immediate unit. Now here is where the strategic implications expand beyond the tactical battlefield. Russia has invested heavily in special purpose capabilities precisely because modern warfare rewards precision and intelligence over mass and firepower alone. The Soviet model of overwhelming enemy defenses through sheer numerical superiority foundered in Afghanistan and Chechnya. Russian military theorists studied American special operations successes in Iraq and Afghanistan and attempted to build similar capabilities within their own force structure. The special purpose brigades represent that investment. They are Moscow's attempt to develop precision warfare capacity that can achieve strategic objectives without the political costs of mass mobilization. When personnel from these elite formations choose surrender, it signals catastrophic failure in the psychological dimension of warfare. Military effectiveness depends on 3 pillars: capability, capacity, and will. Capability means possessing effective weapons and training. Capacity means having sufficient numbers of personnel and equipment. Will means maintaining the psychological commitment to employ capability and capacity toward mission objectives. Russia retains significant capability in terms of weapons systems and tactical doctrine. Russia maintains capacity through mobilization and recruitment, however coerced. But will is collapsing at precisely the tiers of the military Moscow can least afford to lose. Think about what that means for Russian operational planning. Every reconnaissance mission now carries the risk that operators will surrender rather than return with intelligence. Every sabotage operation faces the possibility that personnel will defect with knowledge of objectives and methods. Every direct action mission must account for the chance that operators will choose Ukrainian custody over continued service. This uncertainty degrades the entire operational calculus. Commanders cannot plan complex operations when they cannot trust personnel execution. The second-order effects extend into recruitment and retention across Russian special operations community. Special purpose service traditionally carried prestige and material benefits that offset increased danger. Operators received higher pay than standard infantry, better equipment, more respect from civilian population, and pride in belonging to elite formation. If that psychological contract breaks down, if operators conclude the costs exceed any benefits, recruitment suffers catastrophically. Russia cannot compel special operations service the way it conscripts standard infantry. These roles require volunteers willing to undergo selection and training. When volunteers see elite unit members choosing surrender, the entire recruitment pipeline threatens to dry up. The Ukrainian decision to release this footage publicly, rather than simply exploiting the intelligence value privately, reveals sophisticated understanding of information warfare dynamics. The footage serves multiple audiences simultaneously, each receiving tailored messages. To Russian special purpose personnel, the message is clear. Surrender remains an option that results in humane treatment rather than execution or torture. Russian propaganda claims Ukrainian forces execute prisoners. This footage directly contradicts that narrative with visual evidence Russian soldiers can trust more than official statements. To Russian families, the footage demonstrates their sons and husbands can survive this war through surrender. Every family worrying about a deployed soldier now understands death is not the only alternative to victory. To international audiences, the footage reinforces Ukrainian adherence to laws of war and distinguishes Ukrainian conduct from Russian atrocities documented extensively throughout this conflict. To Ukrainian forces, the footage proves that psychological pressure and humane treatment produce better results than maximalist combat operations that destroy enemy personnel rather than capturing them. The timing of this footage release deserves attention. March 2026 represents a critical inflection point in the war's trajectory. Ukraine has received advanced Western weapon systems including F-16 fighter aircraft and long-range precision strike capabilities. Russian offensive operations in eastern Ukraine have stalled with horrific casualties and minimal territorial gains. International sanctions continue degrading Russian economic capacity to sustain prolonged warfare. Domestic political pressure within Russia grows as casualties mount and economic conditions deteriorate. This is the moment when psychological operations achieve maximum impact. Russian morale, already stressed by battlefield failures, becomes more vulnerable to evidence that elite units are surrendering. The weapon that is doing the most damage to Russian military effectiveness in March 2026 is not a missile system or an artillery piece. It is the smartphone camera documenting surrender and the social media platforms distributing that documentation to audiences Moscow cannot control. Russian forces cannot jam YouTube. They cannot intercept telegram messages showing captured personnel in Ukrainian custody. They cannot prevent Russian soldiers from seeing evidence that contradicts official propaganda. This represents asymmetric warfare at the information level, where Ukraine possesses significant advantages despite inferior conventional military capacity. But there is another dimension to this story that deserves scrutiny. We must acknowledge what this footage does not prove and what questions remain unresolved. First, we do not know how many personnel surrendered. Ukrainian sources describe members of the 14th Separate Special Purpose Brigade without specifying exact numbers. This could represent a squad-sized element of 8 to 12 personnel, or it could represent a larger formation. The distinction matters significantly. A squad surrendering represents tactical-level morale collapse. A platoon or company surrendering represents systemic breakdown. Without precise numbers, assessing the scope of this event remains speculative. Second, we do not know the specific tactical circumstances that precipitated surrender. The footage shows personnel in Ukrainian custody, but it does not document the actual moment of surrender or the tactical situation immediately prior. Were these operators surrounded and out of ammunition despite Ukrainian claims to the contrary? Had they become separated from their parent unit and lost communications? Did leadership breakdown or interpersonal conflict within the unit contribute to the decision? These tactical details would provide crucial context for interpreting whether this represents isolated incident or broader pattern. Third, we must consider Russian perspectives on this event. Moscow will characterize this surrender as treason by individuals who violated their military oaths rather than as evidence of systemic morale problems. Russian military prosecutors will likely announce criminal investigations and trials in absentia to demonstrate consequences for desertion. Russian propaganda will emphasize that millions of Russian personnel continue fighting while highlighting alleged Ukrainian mistreatment of prisoners to discourage future surrenders. The information warfare battle over the meaning of this event continues beyond the initial footage release. Fourth, limitations on Ukrainian capacity to exploit this intelligence operationally deserve acknowledgement. Captured personnel provide valuable information, but that information degrades in value rapidly. Russian forces will assume that any operations these personnel knew about have been compromised. They will change communications procedures, relocate command posts, and alter operational plans. The intelligence windfall has a short shelf life before Russian countermeasures render it obsolete. What remains uncertain is whether this surrender represents an isolated incident or the leading edge of broader morale collapse within Russian special operations community. Single events can be anomalous. Patterns indicate systemic problems. We will know which category this falls into by watching for additional surrenders from elite formations over coming weeks. If this proves to be isolated incident, Russian military leadership will contain the damage through propaganda and internal discipline. If additional special purpose personnel surrender, it confirms that psychological cohesion within Russia's most elite formations is disintegrating. The broader question is whether Russian military leadership possesses the tools to arrest this morale decline. Traditionally, militaries address morale problems through improved conditions, ideological motivation, or coercive discipline. Russia cannot significantly improve frontline conditions while the war continues grinding through personnel and equipment. Ideological motivation proves difficult when official war justifications contradict observable reality and personal experience. That leaves coercive discipline, but coercion works better on standard infantry, than on special operations personnel who possess both the training and the operational independence to evade punishment. What has fundamentally changed is the information environment in which Russian forces operate. Soviet-era military leadership controlled information flow to and from frontline personnel. Letters home were censored. Soldiers could not communicate directly with families. Access to Western media was prohibited. In 2026, Russian soldiers carry smartphones. They communicate via encrypted messaging apps. They see Ukrainian footage on Telegram and vContact. They know when official propaganda contradicts reality because they can access alternative information sources. This makes psychological operations far more effective and makes containing the damage from events like elite unit surrenders virtually impossible. The strategic trajectory this event suggests is deeply concerning for Russian military planners. Wars are won or lost based on armies' willingness to continue fighting. Superior numbers and firepower matter little if personnel refuse to employ them. Ukraine recognized early in this conflict that it could not match Russian numerical superiority directly. Instead, Ukrainian strategy has emphasized making continued Russian offensive operations psychologically and politically unsustainable. Every documented atrocity, every recorded surrender, every piece of evidence contradicting official narratives serves this strategic objective. If Russian society and Russian military personnel conclude the war costs exceed any conceivable benefits, Russia loses regardless of tactical battlefield outcomes. The connection to broader geopolitical dynamics is direct. Western support for Ukraine depends partly on confidence that Ukraine can achieve favorable war termination despite Russian advantages in population and industrial base. Evidence that Russian morale is cracking at elite levels reinforces arguments for continued Western military assistance. It suggests that sustained pressure will produce strategic results through psychological collapse rather than requiring total Russian military defeat through conventional combat. This makes continued Western investment more politically sustainable within NATO capitals. Watch what happens next in 3 specific areas. First, watch for additional surrenders from Russian special operations units. A pattern confirms systemic morale breakdown rather than isolated incident. Second, watch Russian propaganda responses. Aggressive prosecution and harsh rhetoric indicates Moscow fears this becoming a trend. Third, watch Ukrainian information warfare campaigns. If Ukraine recognizes the effectiveness of this approach, expect more prominent publicity for captured Russian personnel and more sophisticated targeting of Russian audiences through social media. This analysis revealed that Russia's problems extend far beyond tanks and artillery. They extend into the psychological domain where elite personnel are choosing surrender over continued service. When your most trained, most equipped, most valued formations are walking into enemy custody, you face a crisis that no amount of mobilization or equipment can solve. That is the reality Moscow confronts in March 2026, and that reality is documented in footage Ukraine just released to the world. If this analysis helped you understand why a single surrender carries strategic implications far beyond tactical battlefield updates, subscribe and turn on notifications. We are covering the evolution of Ukrainian information warfare doctrine and its effectiveness against Russian military cohesion next. This war is being fought on multiple dimensions simultaneously, and understanding all of them is critical to grasping where this conflict is headed. Stay informed, stay analytical, and we will see you in the next one.